Have you ever dreamed of another kind of life? Not the job you don't want to go off to in the morning, or the house you have to keep on paying for year after year, but a life closer to the earth, a little place in the country that you build yourself, a garden, and some solar panels for electricity. Time to be with those you love and to do the things you most want to do. An impossible dream? Maybe not. Right now, people all over are working to create an alternative to a consumer society that gives us less and less satisfaction and is more and more destructive to the earth and to us as well. Let's meet some of these pioneers. Tucked away in little valleys and on hillsides in southwestern Oregon, a number of remarkable experiments are going on. They started when Linda Smiley and Yanto Evans rediscovered an old way of building with earth, sand, and straw called cob, and now direct a school for natural building.
Hello, I'm Linda Smiley, and we're here at the North American School of Natural Building in Coquille, Oregon. It actually started when Yanto and I were on our property in Cottage Grove, and we were ready to build another little cottage. We had started this project called Tiny Cottages. Around that same time, we were visiting Yanto's family in Wales. We were looking at the vernacular architecture, and we found a couple cob cottages at that time, and we were excited about it. And we found one in on the windy coast of Wales, and we asked ourselves, well, you know, if these buildings can withstand these harsh climates, you know, what about Oregon? After our tour, we visited a friend who's an architect in Bristol, and we were telling him about our story and thinking, well, you know, why not cob in Oregon? So he gave us a small little grant and said, you know, here, go build one. And so we set out to build one, and it was quite a funny sort of thing, because we had a lot of people come by saying, you can't do this. You know, you better put in rebarb, or you better put in some posts, or it's going to wash away, or, you know, this is just something that's not going to work. So we just experimented and built a really sweet cottage that we were very proud of, and a lot of visitors came to see it, and we're very excited because this was so unknown in North America, and earth as a building material was really new to a lot of us. One of our students, after the workshop, said, okay, I'm ready to go build my house now. And we said, you gotta be kidding, you know, you just can't go build your house after one little workshop. And she did. It all took off from there, partly the interest of people that were fascinated with the building technique, but more than that, just the mystery and magic that one can create when you begin to sculpt your house with this material. And when we built our first little cottage, we were still thinking in the box, so to speak. We built a little cob box. And as we were building our little cob box, we got to the window, and we wanted to do I think we wanted to do a round window or something. And we're trying to figure out how to do a round wooden frame. We're not, you know, professional woodworkers or anything. And so we got into this little habit of asking ourselves questions when we were trying to figure something out, like, what would be the simplest way to do this? And the answer was, well, just put the window in and sculpt around it. So we did that, and by just putting in that one window and sculpting around it, everything opened up. We thought, this is really sculpture. We can really work with movement and line and shape and form. And when we started doing that, a whole new world of sculpture opened up to us, and we felt more like a cob artist than a builder in a way. I started a little experiment in maybe the first workshops that we started teaching. I was really interested in why people were so fascinated with this and what was the key to changing people's lives, because it seemed like people were coming for a change. They were looking for something. They wanted more health in their life. They wanted more beauty in their life. They wanted a simpler life. They wanted all these things. So with a background in process orientation psychology and as a background as recreational therapist, I thought, well, here's an opportunity to use the sculptural medium and allow people to go into an inner process or a deeper process to try to really look at, well, what is the dream home? What is the dream here? And sculpture is a really great medium for allowing those stories to unfold. We teach fun little sculpting exercises like how to sculpt bas-relief on the walls, or how to sculpt a lovely courtyard wall like this, and how to take patterns and things like, you know, things like this of how to create pattern in walls. But more than anything else, when students unleash their minds and allow themselves to think, let's say, outside of the box, that when you're hand sculpting your house, you're really allowing yourself to sculpt a special place around you. All kinds of interesting things happen. Sometimes new visions of what they're looking for may happen. Sometimes sitting with their new friends and discussing the meaning of life and what is important and why they're here, and all these things tend to get sculpted into, one, the buildings that we start making, and two, beginning to think about how they are going to shape their lives, their families, their communities.
I'm Yanto Evans. I'm the director of the North American School of Natural Building, which is where we are right now. I also run Cobb Cottage Company and involve myself in training people to build their own natural houses and training people to do ecological food production. For the first 50 years of my life, I wasted a lot of energy trying to fight against the existing system. And then I realized that that's not a good way to go. For a brief period in my 20s, I thought I could reform the system, and so I became an architect. I went to architecture school for 5 years, got all sorts of fancy pieces of paper to say I'd been there, and wasted 5 years essentially being in institutions, when I could have been out learning about the world. But it taught me about institutions and society and how it functions. And so by the time I was 30, I was ready to leave all that stuff. So I quit my job in the British Civil Service. For the last 35 years, I've been a free soul and able to do what I wanted to. 6 or 8 years ago, I started to think about setting up my own school, the way I wanted to do it, the school that I'd always wanted to be at. We have a place where there can be permanent buildings as demonstrations, not just of finished buildings, not of buildings as product, but building as process. And so the buildings that you'll see here are nearly all unfinished. I'm not apologetic about that. I think it's important to see that buildings, good buildings, are process. We found it attractive that the 30 acres that we lease is unroaded. You can't drive to it. You can drive just to the very edge of our 30 acres. There's no road into it. So to come to the school, you have to park your car and walk down a trail and cross a flimsy little bridge over a chasm and watch out for the troll under the bridge. We like that a lot. It's a be here now place. And so the quality of work that our students put out is extremely high. And we can take on people and, unbelievably to me, in a week or 10 days, train them to build a house for themselves. As an architect who spent 5 years in school and at the end of it couldn't build a house, had you told me this 15 years ago, I would never have believed you. I would never have believed that you can learn to build your own house in a 10-day workshop. But the proof is there by the dozens of people who've now gone out and done that. Once you don't have to be paying a mortgage anymore, then maybe you don't need to have 2 cars for each of you to get to work separately. And then maybe you don't need so much income, and then maybe you can keep your kids at home and grow a big garden and do things together as a family. So our role here is to be support for people who already know what's wrong with their lives and already know that they need to do something about it, but just don't quite know what they can do. They don't know how to start. So the archetypal people who come to us are intelligent, very often overeducated, well-read, people of heart as well as brain. If people want to know why should I come to an expensive workshop and travel a tremendous distance and take a whole week off work to do this, I tell them there's no substitute for watching an expert work, and I don't know anybody who can tell you when you've got the right building material. How does it feel? How does that handful of sand and clay sound? How does it feel in your fingers? One of the things that I try to do as director of the school is bring people back in touch with nature, not just by standing and looking, but by doing things with nature. Taking the ground underneath their feet and turning it into structure. Learning how different kinds of wood can be split to make roof shingles. Letting them fail, letting them screw up and make shingles that don't work, that don't split right, that come out too thick, that rot easily. During the course of a week or 10 days or 3 weeks or however long our workshops are, we get people to work on necessary buildings. A lot of construction schools don't do that. They build something in a level field, and at the end of the week they knock it down and another group comes in and they do it again. There's an unreality about that I don't like. I like the knowledge that if this wall's going to stay here, your thumbprints will still be there for your great-grandchildren to come and see. So you have a responsibility from the beginning to do it right. So even the first day of doing something completely new to you, which you have no experience in, you have the responsibility to do it well enough that it will be structurally sound and beautiful. So we stress that everything you do with care. Not just manual care, but emotional care. You put your emotional investment into it, as well as the craftsman's skill of how it's built. What we try to do is give all these people courage to go out and create a home for themselves. And the magic of this stuff, which is not going to solve the world's problems, believe me, but the magic of it is that it's a key that opens a door that previously people could only see through. So it's as if for years you've been standing at this door looking into a room that looks much nicer than where you are right now. The sun's shining into it, and there are flowers, and there are beautiful paintings on the walls, and the furniture looks comfy and it's warm and snug, and you're out in the cold and everything is noisy and bright and not what you want to be. And so you look through that window in the door and you're really wanting to go through, but you can't break the glass and you don't have a key. What Cobb is about is giving people a key. Cobb's something that you can just dig up from beneath your feet, wherever you're standing, and turn it into a house. It costs almost nothing, it's relatively healthy, and anyone can do it.
This is certainly not like the schools we are used to. And it is not just about building inexpensively with natural materials. It aims at helping us change the way we see, so we can change the way we live. Let's visit some of Linda and Yanto's students and see how they have fared. 5 years ago, Conrad and Courtney Rogmans moved to an unimproved piece of rural land near Jacksonville, Oregon with their 2 small children and began the long, hard process of building a new life for themselves.
My name is Conrad Rogmans, and I live here in Jackson County in the Little Applegate Valley. And I teach here in natural building workshops as well as in other places. And I have a straw bale house and several cottages on my land where we live with several people. I'm originally from the Netherlands. I immigrated to the United States in 1986. I've been living here ever since. I have an organization called House Alive, and we teach workshops on natural building and mostly on cob, straw bale, and different variations of that. You know, we do earthen plasters, earthen floors. Basically teach people how to use straw, sand, and clay in different combinations. My wife, Courtney, and I used to be directors of a camp in Southern Oregon, and also functioned as a conference center. And one fall, we got a group coming to the conference center that was called the Natural Builders. And they not only had a conference there, but they built all kinds of interesting structures out of wood and clay and poles and straw as a contribution to the camp. And we really had a great time, and immediately felt connected to that group. It made a lot of sense to me to have fun building together, making beautiful things, and taking care of the environment at the same time. It was a very attractive thing. It combined a lot of interests of mine. And that group came back for several years in a row. And eventually I decided I wanted to be one of them and quit my job and started teaching natural building, first with other people and then by myself. For me, natural building, or I should really speak to the workshops that I do, is about bringing people together, doing something that's really fun and beautiful, and essentially giving people a little bit of hope again. People they travel far often to get here. They're tired from jobs that they've been doing. They feel disconnected to the out of doors. They feel incapable of doing a lot of things that have to do with physical activity, such as building a house. And then they get together with a group of people for a week or 3 weeks or 6 weeks, and they take a workshop. And at the end of the workshop, their bodies feel better. They've laughed a lot. They built something beautiful with a group of people. And they've lived outdoors. They had some real food for a couple of weeks that wasn't all prefab or processed food. And they feel good again, and they leave the workshop with a feeling of, I can do things, I can build a house, I can be part of a group, I can laugh again, I can do things physically. The people come to the workshops with a building question, and as they leave, those building questions have often dissolved, not because they got the answer, but because they realize it's actually about something else. The bottom line is that life is not about housing or gardening or solar panels or gray water systems, but life is about life and other people. If people would ask me about what I do here and what it all means, it has to do with connecting to people at a different level. But really connecting on a level of creating beauty, enjoying good food, being truly concerned for one another, cutting out the competitiveness between people and changing into a cooperative living situations. That's in the end what it's all about, that we stop being disconnected and afraid from one another.
We only camped in a tent for July and August, and by mid-September we had our yurt up and we were in the yurt. And it was only a 20-foot yurt. I think actually living in a small space with kids and a partner can be really harmonious to the family structure. It's hard to remember what it felt like to have nothing and just be here on this raw piece of land, because the heat was really hard for me, and I remember being just really, really uncomfortable in the heat sometimes in the summer. So once we got this straw bale house, I mean, it changed my experience of living here drastically, because I had a place that I could get away from the heat. And before we had this house up, I didn't have that. So I had a good 2 years, 2 hot summers of, 100 degrees after dinner in the yurt. So it wasn't all fun and games. There was some discomfort along the way, but it's been fun. I love this house. I love the naturalness of it. I love that the kids climb all over the cob walls and their friends come over and they jump from here onto the couch, and just the whole experience, the earthen floor and the plasters and the cool to the touch but softness of the plasters. And as I say, it's again a small space in regards to other families of 4. There's not very many people. Actually, I don't know of anybody who lives in 950 square feet with their family of 4. It's fun to have a dream, to do something, and it's fun to take steps towards that. And the process is great, and it's also painful, but that's what life is. I mean, no matter what you're doing, whether you're building your own house or following your dream in the city, you're still gonna meet yourself. And that road to meeting yourself is full of joy and pain, regardless. So you might as well build a beautiful house at the same time you're finding yourself. Have something at the end.
At nearby White Oak Farm, Taylor Starr and his friends created an organic farm and an educational center and embarked on the challenging task of making a community building out of natural materials.
Well, my name is Taylor Starr. We're at White Oak Farm and Education Center in Williams, Oregon. This farm is a nonprofit farm. It's owned by Land Trust. We have 62 acres here in Southern Oregon on the edge of the Siskiyou Mountains. We do children's education programs. We grow food organically, about 2 acres of vegetables and fruit trees, berries. And then we also do natural building projects. And we have workshops for adults in natural building. And I'm leaning against the biggest project we've taken on to date. We've been here on the land for about 3 years. And we've been working on this project that we call the Common House for 2 years. And it's a pole frame building, poles that we harvested in Williams. And then the walls are made of straw bale and cob, light straw clay, all with earthen plasters. We started out with the design idea of the circle because in our work with children and with adults too, we really like to start from a circle. And we meet in circle, we come back to circle, and that's the foundation of the programs. And it's also philosophically, in nature, circles and cycles, and it's something we really stress. So as we were designing the building, the first thing we did was we figured how many kids could fit in a circle. We wanted to be able to have a circle that could comfortably fit 25 or 30 children because that's how many come to the farm for school visits. We just wanted a place where kids could come and learn how to milk a goat and learn how to live with the land and learn how to cook food and make tortillas from corn that was grown on the farm. Basically, this is going to be a multi-purpose structure that we can host big events here, and then also we can just be warm and cozy in the winter with 5 people who live here cooking food and reading and doing the work of the farm. There's been to this point, I think about 150 people who've spent, a good solid day at least working on this building. And so it really feels like an amazing labor of love of people who've been involved in this project. It exists because of so many people's generosity and excitement about natural building and wanting to get their hands into it. And we had a big party a couple weeks ago with lots of friends from the community and folks who've worked on the house before, and it was the first time that we were actually inside eating and just enjoying each other's company, and it felt really magical to see the space actually be something beyond just a project or something on the to-do list, but to actually be a functional, beautiful place to be with other people and to talk about positive change and work towards that. For me, not having any formal background in construction and really just kind of learning it all as we've gone it's so empowering because it's all really accessible, it's all really doable, and that's an amazing aspect of building with natural materials that I just feel so thankful for. And it's just once you start, it's hard to stop. And Maybe if we finish this building, that would give me a reason to stop. But right now, it just feels really good to be working on it and to be creating something that we feel proud about. My name is Jim Heim. I'm an educator, high school teacher, and also a natural builder. I live in Ashland, Oregon, and I'm summering here in Williams, Oregon, to do some natural building workshops on White Oak Farm property. And a question came up of why do I live the way I live, or why do I do these things? Why am I interested in natural building and some of the other stuff going on in this land, permaculture, outdoor education. And for me, it's, there's a piece around wanting to, save the earth, but it's really also just a quality of life issue. I've just found that living in this way is just a lot more satisfying. It's physically more demanding, but it's what my body enjoys, and it's what makes sense to my spirit, and what makes sense to raising my children. I've done some traditional building in the past, and doing natural building is just so much more pleasant on the body. It feels more natural, working with materials like cob, working with materials like this cordwood cob wall that I'm standing in front of here. Just really simple, everything's from the land right here. This wall is also, could last for hundreds of years. And how complicated is it to be able to build yourself a structure like this one right here behind me, something that you could live in. Maybe not the ideal, perfect, fancy home, but just something that you feel like I could make that and I could live in it. I think you could learn how to do this structure in a week. The workshop that was created to do this structure behind me, which is straw bale, and it's this cordwood cob mix in the front wall and then straw bale around the perimeter, is sitting on just earthen bags. So there are these nylon bags, just like sandbags, that are filled with concrete, and with a small percentage of concrete actually in the base, just about a shovelful for every 12 shovelfuls of gravel. And it's stacked up about 4 courses high to get the straw off of the ground. And this whole structure was built in a weekend, in a workshop. Is natural building any more complicated than traditional building? No, I'd say it's easier, especially with materials like this. Cob is really forgiving. It's also beautiful because you can do lots of curves with it as well. So it's fairly easy to learn. Labor intensive, sure, but also enjoyable. What do you want to be doing with your time? If you feel like working with your body in a way that could be satisfying to make yourself a living structure or even just a guest house, it's very doable.
Brendan Flanagan, with his wife and friends, with a little bit of money and a lot of work, transformed a steep wooded hillside into a community of homes and gardens.
My name is Brendan, and this is the Southern Oregon Cascades, the South Umpqua watershed, and this is my home. We call it Sisyphus Gardens, and welcome. In the mid-90s, I was traveling a lot, living very, very cheaply, hopping freight trains, hitchhiking, squatting in abandoned houses, spending most of my time in the city. I'd grown up in the country and always had wanted to get back to a more rural situation, at least for some portion of my life. An uncle, a family member, told me that he had this piece of raw land in Southern Oregon that he wasn't using, and a couple friends and I just wanted to go get out of the city for the summer, camp out. And so we did. We came to this piece of property and there was nothing here. No water set up, no electricity, no buildings, no gardens. We just camped out, and by the end of the summer, we decided we wanted to stay for an indefinite amount of time and see what we could make of this place. And so that's what we've done. That first summer we were down here, being kind of fresh from the city and not knowing really a lot about building, and just generally coming from a culture, coming from a milieu of people who are interested in sort of living outside of normal day-to-day society. Somewhere I came across mention of these workshops being put on by Cobb Cottage Company about, building with earth, and the idea really resonated with me. I said, well, let's try it out. So I took a course, and that was that first summer. We were just looking for some way to build, since we didn't really know how to build. That was a week. There was a lot of good information and skills being taught, but I think mainly it was just the inspiration that got me going. I was inspired by the idea and just kind of enrolled with it. You know, I came away with those skills. Others here had other skills to contribute, and so we all just sort of learned as we went and started building and continued to do so. Well, we've been here over 10 years now. The reason continue to live here and continue to build with natural materials and spend all our time in these woods is because we find it satisfying and not too stressful. Being that this is sort of family land and the way we've decided to build hasn't cost us much money. We don't have lots of debt over our heads, and I can choose how much I want to work in a given year without being worried about some sort of financial nightmare. I came into building not knowing anything about building other than having lived in them, and I just started doing it and found that I enjoyed it. I found that I enjoyed being able to design spaces to fit needs, fit my own needs and other close friends' needs. I found that empowering, but I also found it very easy. I found that, you know, instead of being this big, crazy secret set of codes, building is actually quite simple, and it doesn't take a lot of strange technical information to succeed at. So if people want to start moving outside of a situation where they feel trapped, I don't think that being able to build your own home is any sort of impediment. It's actually right there at your fingertips if you just allow yourself to kind of remove the blinders. Building with cob or straw bale, slip straw, raw wood, stone, all these things are maybe intimidating at first, but that's just because of sort of the mystical aura surrounding building, I think. But they're all very easy to play with. I started out not knowing how to build, and now people hire me to build with and for them, which certainly wasn't my intention when I wanted to just build my own house, but I found that I enjoyed building so much that it was a way I could make a living that didn't drive me nuts.
While most of these experiments understandably take place in the country, Rob Bowman has been building a village in the middle of the city of Eugene and working to integrate aspects of natural building into mainstream building.
My name is Robert Bowman. I've been a carpenter for about 20 years, and I discovered the field of green building and got excited about it because it brought new relevance to what had just been a job for me. So I discovered straw bale and cob construction and got very enthusiastic about them. I'm privileged to own a rather large piece of urban property in West Eugene, 5 tax lots contiguous. My mother and I bought them together 15 years ago. I began building houses on these lots. The first innovative building that I built here is a straw bale building, about 600 square feet in its footprint. The walls are about 2 feet thick, rendering about 400 square feet of usable indoor floor space. It's earthen plaster inside and out, and an earthen floor and some cob details on the interior. And then we have a friend who built an actual cob building here. It's a small building, about 120 square feet. It now serves as our guest cottage. And then I built a couple of larger buildings. They're wooden buildings. I wanted to take the very best features of natural building and try to integrate them into a more conventional structure that mainstream builders could be expected to actually make a profit building, in the hopes that it would be more widely used. In the year 2001, I finished a triplex, a 3-unit building, a rather large, ambitious building. We did a unique framing system using pairs of 2x3s held apart by little wooden gussets, and those were the studs. We treat them just as though they were studs and then frame up walls, and we sheathed them with plywood. 95% of the wood, including the plywood, was certified through the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC certified wood, meaning that it's somewhat sensitively harvested. The building has earthen floors, and there are big round logs that hold up the second floor, so it's a very beautiful building showcasing the Northwest's wood heritage. Of all the earthen things that I've played with, I consider earthen floors to be potentially the most viable in terms of going into the mainstream, because you really can make a very beautiful and durable floor out of earth. The trick is to saturate it with linseed oil, and the oil soaks in and sort of congeals together into this hard, dry surface. And you can mop it, you can roll around on a desk chair on it. At that time, people started referring to this place as an eco-village, and so we named it Maitreya Eco-Village. Maitreya being the new incarnation of the Buddha, who's supposed to be incarnated as a loving, nurturing community of people as opposed to an individual. This building here has a number of factors that people like about it. It's got a very beautiful natural cedar wooden siding on the outside, a window seat that I'm sitting in that people automatically gravitate toward. There's a high ceiling in this room. Indeed, the ceiling is so high it could have been a second story up there. But I wanted one really attractive room with a very nice quality of light and spaciousness that would be very inviting. And the house is just over 1,000 square feet. I can justify a 1,000 square foot dwelling, especially when the wood is harvested gently. The windows and cabinets and exterior doors were all built on site using local labor and what I consider to be a decentralized, more appropriate scale of economics. Another thing that's on my mind is the issue of social justice. It's one thing to live in an environmentally responsible house, but it's quite another to consider the question of social responsibility. And that question comes in when we consider just how wealthy a country we are in the United States and just how poor other countries are, other people around the world are, and how the difference in wealth is not a coincidence. The poor distribution of the world's wealth is a direct and deliberate result of U.S. foreign policies. And when I say it's an extremely poor distribution of the world's wealth, most people wouldn't quite realize just how gross it is. It's not an exaggeration to say that a good, solid majority of the world's people lives on less than $3 or $4 a day. For our lifestyles to be truly responsible, environmental responsibility is one thing, but we must also be socially responsible. So, in other words, instead of living in a toxic, environmentally undesirable house, we must live in environmentally thoughtful houses. But also, we must live in houses that are smaller. It is possible that there would be a 5,000 square foot environmentally responsible house, but there would be no such thing as a 5,000 square foot socially responsible house for a single family. So that would be my chief point, that arguing that we must embrace the voluntary simplicity ethic and choose simpler lifestyles where we're consuming fewer resources in the hopes that somehow greater numbers of resources will find their way into the hands of the poor people around the world from whom we've been stealing these resources for really hundreds of years.
Rob's passion for social justice points to a remarkable feature of the natural building movement in the United States. It has been almost spontaneously partnering with people all over the world to share skills and create inexpensive, beautiful buildings which everyone can afford. Mika Bunch not only built his own home on a shoestring budget, but works abroad with Clayworks to share his love of natural building.
My name is Mika. I'm also known as Michael Bunch. I started pretty much in 1995. I took a one-week workshop with Cobb Cottage Company and proceeded to build my own house, not having any other experience other than that. and had to figure out a lot of things along the way. So we're sitting here in the little studio that I built after that workshop. As soon as I found cob, it was like I had found something that I could really get into, and that was a passion of mine. I've always been a creative person. I've always been a kinesthetic person that really thrives in hands-on types of things. I built this house, and actually it was kind of like I was just fostering itself to grow itself. Like I was just facilitating something that was growing out of the earth. And during that process, I knew that if I had to leave this house, or if I was my life changes and I go somewhere else, that I still have the skills and the knowledge and the techniques with me and in me, that I can do this anywhere. And so the idea of building this house was to build something very small as well, so that then I could build it and move on if I needed to. Because this land is not owned by me. It's, I'm just here and I'm just building. And so I knew that at the time, and I knew that I just needed to build. I needed to just get the agreement with the landlord and build this house, because I would be getting the direct benefit of experience and transformation of that process. It's really been a process of surrender for me, to not knowing exactly how to do things and figuring it out, asking a lot of people and builders, conventional builders, natural builders along the way. I built this house when I didn't have any money. I didn't even actually have a car. We used the little back of the station wagon to fill gravel and things in. And the natural building community is an amazing group of people. It's very much like family, and the freedom and flowing of information is really what I really love about this community. Rather than people being competitive and kind of hoarding their information or their sources of things, it's more about sharing these things, because it's going to help the movement unfold. It's going to give people more access to this way of being, and this way of being is what people first take a workshop for. When they see houses like this, they see that and they go, I want to live that way. And they're typing at their computer in some office, cubicle. There's this sense of there's something else out there. But I think the main thing is it's hard for people to make that jump. And what are they going to do? Are they going to quit their job? How are they going to make that bridge to this kind of world? And so they take a workshop, and that kind of starts them thinking about it, even though usually the people that take those workshops already are on that kind of another collision course path to transformation. And it's really a nice stepping stone to get the information, and also know that you don't necessarily have to build a whole cob house. You can actually modify your own existing structures, and that's what where I see the future. I see the future as the greening and the permacultureization of our cities and urban places, existing structures being retrofitted to be more passive solar, be more friendly as far as natural finishes and earthen floors over concrete slabs, so that it's softer on the joints. And I see that as being a major forthcoming transformation. Clayworks is an organization that's a nonprofit. It's based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but a lot of the programs and trainings are international. The founding director, Janelle Kapoor, was in Thailand, and she was in a boat, and there was a monk in the boat, and she was sitting next to him, and he starts asking her what she does, and she says, oh, I do earthen building, I do cob, and she's like, what's that? And they get to talking, and Next thing you know, he's like, I want you to come to my ashram and build something, and we'll do like a little workshop or something. And so she has the workshop there. It's a cob workshop. It's actually the first cob workshop in Thailand, because in Thailand they don't have a tradition for earthen construction. When they got their hands into cob, they just were really excited.
Kiko Denzer, a sculptor, and his wife Hannah, a baker and an organic gardener, transformed a dilapidated outbuilding in the country into a snug home surrounded by beautiful gardens.
Hey, I'm Hannah, living in the Coast Range in Oregon with my husband Kiko and 2 small boys. I grew up in Shropshire, England. I've been living here for 7 years, and I grow most of our vegetables that we eat. Any time of the year I can go out and scrape together something, and I get a huge amount of joy from that, just, being able to make a salad in December. And we have a wood-fired oven, which is a key part of our diet, a lot of bread. I love gardening, I love quiet spaces, I love being able to walk where I want in the woods. It just makes my soul feel happy living out here. I feel living in a mud house is pretty cool. Like somebody said, it felt like we were living in a handmade pot. I wake up some mornings and the sun's streaming through the window and it's like, wow, I get to live here? And it feels a privilege. I think I enjoy seeing how much we can do without. I enjoy the purges when I go through and say we've got to get rid of stuff and take it to Goodwill or give it away. And I'm still amazed, even though we're trying to live simply and we're living below poverty, I'm still amazed how much stuff we accumulate. I mean, our 3-year-old has more toys than I think a lot of kids get in a lifetime in developing countries. Before I moved to America, I never drove a car at all. I had to learn when I moved out here, and that's one of the biggest issues for me is my dependence on cars and oil for transport, because it's not something that I feel I should be doing, yet to keep me sane on a social level, I have to go to town at least once a week in summer and 2, even 3 times a week in winter. Another reason I like living out here is just that I think it's a great place for a child to grow up. He's going to be able to go walking in the forests, he's going to be able to find out what happens in the creek that runs by the garden, and growing up in a quiet, beautiful place is just going to be such an opportunity to learn and I think grow to love. I hope grow to love, there are no guarantees, sort of the countryside and the environment. That's pretty important, I think.
My name is Kiko Denzer. I was renting a room basically from an elderly lady, and it didn't work out for her, so I needed to find a new place to live. And one of the folks I'd gotten to know out here said, oh, we got an old cabin on the place, you could fix it up. So I came out and looked at that cabin, which was falling down, and tar paper shack with mats of very sluggish flies under the tar paper when you peeled it back, and small windows and dark, and I couldn't see any of the surrounding valley. I just didn't notice any of it. And I thought about it for a couple of weeks with dread, because I'd never lived in the country. I was a town kid, and a friend of mine sort of talked me through it a little bit, and I thought, well, if I don't like it, I can do something else. So I moved out to try it out, and that was 12 years ago. And I've lived longer here than I've lived anywhere else in my life. And it gave me an opportunity to try things I'd been wanting to try, like growing a garden, building with cob. I'd already done some ovens at that point. My friend who sort of set me up with this, with the cabin and the whole deal, said, oh yeah, sure, do whatever you want. So this was the old woodshed, which is just board and batten and an old tin roof. So I put a pony wall under the roof to hold it up while I took the walls away. I took the walls away and replaced them with cob. It's beautiful. It lets in a lot of light. It lives up to, the traditional reputation of cob, warm in the winter and cool in the summer. I've always favored freedom over money, so I've always found cheap places to live that left me time to do things I wanted to do. So when I got out here, I wanted to spend more time making sculpture and doing art. I started combining practical things like ovens and benches with sculptural detail or design.
Kiko has been working with his friends Ocean and Intaba on using cob in their organic restaurant in Corvallis called Intaba's.
Actually, partly as a result of doing cob workshops. She loves to cook, she's trained as a cook, she loved cooking for a workshop so much they decided to open a restaurant. So he said, great, we'll open a mud restaurant. So he got a lease on this dumpy little house, wrapped it in 140 feet of cob wall, made some earthen benches. I did some decorative work on the inside of the restaurant with earthen plasters. Now he's expanding, and so we're covering up some of the original mud work, and he wants more, so we covered it up with sheetrock, and I'm doing an earthen plaster. You know, people come into the restaurant, it's local, it's organic, they're selling locally raised meat, you know, pasture-fed, all kinds of good stuff, and have some very devoted clientele. And I think part of the reason people like it is because they go in and it's a different kind of environment than, you know, your typical sort of high-end restaurant.
And one of the biggest attractions there is Kiko's magnificent cob oven.
The nice thing about working with earth is you can build beautiful things that are sculptural, and the dividing line between sculpture and architecture is dissolved, which is as it should be, because they are one and the same thing, and it's only in modern sort of context that they become divided. It makes much more sense to me to be somebody who works for freedom and beauty in a context where freedom and beauty are appreciated and valuable than it does to make stuff you can sell in a gallery so people can hang their money on the wall, which is, you know, essentially what gallery art comes down to. It's all about preserving objects. It's not about preserving culture, and this is really about creating and recreating culture, which is what art is about. And I mean, I understood that, but again, the experience of working for that rather than working for money, it's not what they train you for in school.
What we have been seeing are not attempts to escape into the past and avoid social responsibility, but rather attempts to take a step into a saner and more sustainable future in which everyone can share.